think that chemotherapy is a poison, and I'm actually one of them because I don't want to use chemotherapy. In our field, in oncology, actually, we have been very fortunate over the last maybe 10 years that, and our reputation in some way has not been fully restored, but we're working on that, to use as much as possible drugs and treatments that don't include chemotherapy and radiation therapy. And so for a long time, the backbone for limited stage, again, limited stage means contained to the chest and has not metastasized to other organs, was chemotherapy and radiation, until clinical trials showed, actually this year, that chemotherapy and radiation followed by immunotherapy improves outcomes. So that is really something that was presented at our national meeting in Chicago about a month ago. And that is also a big thing which would have never been able to happen without the importance of research and trials. For extensive stage, the backbone, again, for a long time, until a few years ago, was chemotherapy alone. And now we combine chemotherapy and immunotherapy together, improving outcomes. Now, second-line therapy, which is essentially what happens after the first line, traditionally we have been using drugs that have been extremely difficult. And the last few years, we have been using drugs that are easier on the patients, equally or more successful and effective than the treatments that we have been using for the last 20 years. And some of them are mentioned here. The second drug actually is another form of immunotherapy. Now, I talked about immunotherapy a lot, and essentially, when it comes down to small cell lung cancer, there are two major types of immunotherapy. And immunotherapy is a better way sometimes than chemotherapy because it uses your own immune system to fight against the cancer. With chemotherapy, what it does, it kills cancer cells and normal cells, especially normal cells that are dividing fast, without any discrimination. And so that's why chemotherapy has so many side effects, because it affects the normal cells and the cancer cells as well. While immunotherapy tries to take advantage of our own immune system to fight against the cancer. Now, there are two types of immunotherapy. Essentially, one thing to remember is that we have one very powerful cell in our body called the T cell. It's an immune cell. Our cells are also important when we get a viral infection like a cold. This is really our immune system that fights against the cold. And the T cells have ways to slow down. We call them checkpoints. So essentially imagine like brakes. So when our immune system, when our T cells are active, you want something to slow them down. Otherwise, your immune system will work all the time. With cancer, you don't want your T cells to slow down. You want them to be more active. So there are mechanisms to release those brakes so that the T cells will fight against the cancer. And that's what one of the major types of immunotherapy that we have work. The second type, actually this received the Nobel Prize in 2018 by these two gentlemen who spent their entire life studying this mechanism of how these brakes work and how we can actually take advantage of those brakes to activate the T cells. And so, as you can see, research is really one of the very important components of how we improve outcomes and how we take care of people who unfortunately are diagnosed with cancer. And so there's another mechanism of immunotherapy. So as I mentioned before, there are two types of immunotherapy. One is releasing those brakes. We have found that, and it was mentioned before, that although we divide lung cancer into two major groups, small cell and non-small, we know that not all non-small cell lung cancers are the same. There are biomarkers that it's important to know. There are different types of non-small, and there also seems to be different types of small cell. Actually, research have shown that there are probably 4 major types. One of them seems to be very inflamed, as we call it, type, which means that there are a lot of T cells in the environment. In those cases, the immunotherapy that I described before is probably working better, but there are kind of less inflamed types where you need actually to bring those T cells into the tumor. And that's what the second type of immunotherapy that actually was recently approved in May of 2024, called tarlatamab, otherwise also known as BiTE, bispecific T cell engager, that essentially brings the T cell into the tumor. The way it does it is because the small cell lung cancer has a receptor called DLL3, and so the antibody, which is the drug, finds that receptor and brings the T cell in the tumor. So you bring the T cells, and not only you attack the small cell tumors that have that receptor, but also you bring the T cells in the environment. And this is an important therapy, both the checkpoint inhibitors and this one, because we are seeing better results than the results that we were seeing in the past with chemotherapy. And so, you know, our immune system is very important. We are learning more through research about how our immune system works. It's not just vaccines, it's not just your T cells, it's not your B cells. Our brain plays a very important role of how our immune system works. There is this so-called field of neuroimmunology, which essentially studies the connection between our brain, our emotions, and our immune system. And I think this is a not very well studied field. That's really where research also, where you need research to study things that anecdotally, all of us know that stress is not good for our immune system. You know, people who have financial stress, who get a divorce, who have a major life event in their life, their stress level goes up and their immune system goes down. So it's important for more research and more knowledge to be gathered for topics like this. So we talked about clinical trials, and there are 3 types of clinical trials. So when you see your doctor and you talk about trials, it's important to know also what type of trials you're talking about. Trials type 1, it's usually trials that you try to see if drugs are safe. Clinical trials, phase 2, are trials where you try to see if the drugs are working. And phase 3 trials are trials where you essentially try to find if the standard of care is, if the new drug is better than the standard of care. A lot of patients oftentimes ask me, I don't want to participate in a trial because I don't want to take a placebo. I don't want to take nothing. You know, a lot of trials don't have a placebo. Some trials have, like phase 3 trials, compare with the standard of care. So in phase 3 trials, you're actually 50% of the times you take at least what you're going to take anyway, and 50% of the times you take the standard of care and something else. And so it's important to remember that many trials nowadays don't have, you're always taking something, and especially in phase 3 trials, you will take exactly what you would have taken, and 50% of the times you will take something additionally. And so I think it was mentioned today about how African Americans, but also a lot of other people are not so much interested in clinical trials, especially in an African American population. There is a lot of injustice that happened for hundreds of years in many different ways. These are 2 of my favorite books, The Medical Apartheid by Harriet Washington. She's a medical ethicist, and there is a lot of negative, traumatic experience for hundreds of years that affect the decision about participating in trials. One of the famous is the Tuskegee, the syphilis study, where African American patients were misled, and they actually were prevented from getting treatment where treatment was available. And so I think all of these experiences affected, in my opinion, significantly some of these interest in trials. Obviously, as a society, we have made a lot of progress, but more to be done. But I think in the other example, you have the Henrietta Lacks, which is another example of a patient without consent, gave scientist Johns Hopkins took cancer cells without her consent and created a cell line called the HeLa line, which is one of the most famous cell lines that we have used in research to find drugs to help people. And nobody asked this patient, and she was never compensated, and the family has never been compensated for that. Hopefully, we have made a lot of progress in that regard and more to be done, but I think it's important to recognize that because for me, as a physician and as a white physician, it's important to understand some of these things, which it's really difficult to understand unless you read and educate yourself and listen to people's experiences and how they feel about topics like this. Now, the issue is that trials give you a chance sometimes to be at the cutting edge of therapies. This is Mary Williams, is a stage 4 melanoma survivor. At the time when she was diagnosed with melanoma, there was no good treatment and patients were dying within 6 months. Wall Street Journal had an article at that time about the super survivors, which were patients who were receiving immunotherapy, the checkpoint inhibitors, and we knew that about 10 or 20% of those patients were cured from stage 4 melanoma, which we would never have thought about it before. The issue comes down to the fact that a lot of things that we say now can change with research. We say that stage 4, we used to say stage 4 lung cancer, or especially stage 4 non-small cell lung cancer, was not curable. And the truth now with checkpoint inhibitors is that a portion of those patients can be cured. We used to say stage 4 melanoma is not curable. Now we know that a portion of those patients can be cured. Now, this is the author of that book. At that time, she was told that she will die in 6 months, and about 12 years later, she's still alive. This is Jim Allison. He is the one who got the Nobel Prize for the checkpoint inhibitors in 2018. There was this documentary called Breakthrough, describes all the efforts and the difficulties that he faced to go against the odds and against the mainstream to get research published and also to work with a pharmaceutical company to produce some of these drugs. So trials are important because you can help other people, you can help yourself being in the cutting edge, and add also hope in situations that you were told that they are hopeless. And so this is a case of a patient, she's 85, she was 85, actually she's 85 now. She was diagnosed with limited stage small cell lung cancer. She received the chemo and radiation in 2019, and she was treated in an outside institution. She also had a history of non-small cell lung cancer because the smoking exposure is a risk factor both for small cell and non-small. And when I saw her, she had an extensive stage disease with a single metastasis to her liver. We biopsied to prove that this was cancer and it was truly small cell. She received a cycle of chemo and immunotherapy. Unfortunately, she couldn't tolerate chemotherapy because at that time she was in her early 80s. We continued the immunotherapy until 2021. and she had been in remission for almost 3.5 years, for 4 years, when at that time we were telling her that her prognosis was poor and she's not going to do well. One thing that I've learned is that there's a fine line between honesty, transparency, and not helping or facilitating patients to lose hope. That's a very thin line, and it takes a lot of reflection about what is hope and how important it is as a positive emotion and as a kind of a innate component of our existence, not to lose hope. And so I've been very careful about prognosis and how I use the numbers that science is giving us, because it's true that the prognosis is poor, but once in a while, good things happen. And this patient eventually had a relapse in 2023, for which she received localized radiation, and currently she has no evidence of disease, despite the fact that she was diagnosed with extensive stage a few years ago. Now, I don't want to say that this is the case with every patient, but these are outliers that we as scientists also we have to study and learn more from. And also that's another part of research, that we have to use outliers to learn more so that we can identify what makes those super survivors or some of these outliers do better. And there are more research out there talking about some of these outliers that it's important for us to learn. This is my mother over here. And she was diagnosed with lung cancer, non-small cell lung cancer, in 2013. This is from our trip. This is my wife here. The same wife. And she was diagnosed with, in 2013, she was told by me that her prognosis was difficult and that she will die in a year. And we did that trip in 2013 because we all felt that this is important. She was very fortunate that she was part of an expanded access program for some of these immunotherapy drugs. At that time, checkpoint inhibitors that just had come out, they were not available, but you could continue receiving the drug through an expanded access program. And she was fortunate to get it. She lived another 6 years. This is the trip to Egypt with some of her girlfriends. She actually died in 2021. She died in 2021 not from cancer, but from an unrelated situation. And so I am very passionate about research because research benefits everybody. And even if you don't have cancer, it could affect you or your family or your friends. It's important for everybody, regardless of their experience, to help research and also help patients who go through a very difficult journey with their disease. And I would like to thank you.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much for sharing the story about your mother. That's interesting. And a very wise move to point out that the woman in the picture is still your wife. You do not go the way of saying my first wife. So I applaud you, sir. Out of curiosity, if people here in the audience, if you were trying to go to the grocery store, how many of you need directions to go to your local grocery store? None of you. You got it. All right. Now, if you decide you want to go to Pine Bluff for the inauguration of Mayor Flowers, how many of you would have to put in something to the GPS to get you there? You need guidance. Go ahead, raise your hand. Don't feel bad. Okay. No. No. You know, when we think about cancer diagnosis and what do, it can be a very formidable problem in terms of just navigating that system. So to help us with that, next up we have Ms. Ursula Mathis. Ms. Mathis obtained her BS in biology from Florida Memorial University, followed by an MBA, Master's in Business Administration from the American Intercontinental University. She is currently the Director of Quality, Comprehensive Programs, and Services Oncology Service Line at the Phoebe Putney Health System in Albany, Georgia. She'll be telling us a little bit about small cell lung cancer patient navigation, care, and patient support, which, as we heard earlier, is a very important thing. Ms. Mathis. Ms. Mathis, just to kind of give us the thing, we heard just a little while ago where it was pointed out, I think it was Dr. May who said, used the term the third set of ears to hear about what's going on. Tell me about how important is it to have somebody else there listening, and then tell me about this third person. Is that the navigator? Is that just a family member, or how does that work?
Thank you. Thank you all, first of all, for having me. Thank you to this church and this ministry. Thank you. The physicians are a hard act to follow. Let me say that. So thank you for your passion for what you do every day. It speaks volumes in your message, and this community is lucky to have you. So thank you for that. Can I take this? Yeah. I'm a mover, so I'm sorry. But navigation, yes. When we go to our physician's offices and we receive a diagnosis such as cancer, it's just normal. We're human. That from that point on, we're going to receive or hear less than 5% what has been told to us at that time, because now it's just a shock factor. First thing comes to your mind is death, family, finances, children, everything else but what they're telling you as to how we need to move forward. So it's very important at that time that we have someone there. Most of that time it's a family member who's also emotionally connected. So they might hear another 5 to 10%. But if you had a navigator or another family member that can make decisions not necessary for you at that time, but to be able to take notes, to be able to ask questions, to be able to get numbers and resources that when you go home and you digest this and regurgitate it again, that there's someone there that heard the full spectrum and know how to take the next steps. Most health systems have navigators now. Navigators are here to help you navigate your healthcare journey, to help you through the process of needing follow-up appointments, having to make diagnostic testing, to be able to help you with education about your treatment options and choices, to include you in your informed decisions about how you move forward in your healthcare journey. The navigators not necessarily always the ones that do those acts for you, but they help to keep you on route and not deviate from the plan, so that you don't have to make 10 phone calls to get a test done. They may make one and schedule that test for you. But more than that, when we talk about navigation and being able to advocate for ourselves, the navigation really starts with us. We have to be able to ask questions, expect answers. When we don't get those answers, move on to another resource where we can get those answers. We have to be in charge of our healthcare journeys. So when we talk about primary care, and we raise our hand about everybody in here that has a primary care, most of the people, fortunately and unfortunately, that attend these events are the people that are more so in tune with their healthcare journeys. But when you raise your hand and you think about all your loved ones or the people in your household or your spouses or your sisters and your siblings and your parents, how many of them have primary care physicians? How many of those people get prevention and screening? When we come, we have to each one teach one so that we all can reach one. So we want to grow our communities as a whole, and it starts with primary care. That's being in touch with your healthcare journey. Everyone needs to be able to navigate their own healthcare journey, to know what medications you take, to know what your predispositions are, to know what your genetic risk factors are, to know when you need to be screened, how frequently you need to be screened, what are the results of those screenings, what's your family histories. No one knows your history better than you. When you get to a physician, if you've never been to a healthcare provider and you don't have a primary care physician and you get diagnosed with this disease of this cancer, we're starting from ground zero. That's a delay in treatment. That's a delay in care. Dr. Eric Fernald has this phenomenal slides that shows the doubling system of when we get diagnosed. That sometimes one cell, if we wait 30 days for treatment, it doubles into 2 or 3 cells. When we wait 60 to 90 days, now we're at 10 cells. That's advancement in care. That's advance in disease stages. But when you don't have a healthcare proxy, and you haven't navigated yourself or advocated for yourself, when you get there, we're starting at ground zero. So now we got to manage your comorbidities before we can start treatment. Now we got to make sure that your heart is even able to handle the treatment. So we got to manage that. We got to get you in with a cardiologist. That's dependent upon their schedule. Okay, they can't see you for a month. Access to care is not easy, unfortunately. Dr. Lawrence shared that Arkansas is 47 of 50 states with the poorest access to care in the healthcare journey. Just even looking around, and when I was doing my research prior to coming here and riding around today, I went to Starbucks, I passed 3 hospitals, 3 different systems. I passed CHI Vincent, there's another system over here, I passed another healthcare system across from there. I was like, how is there a problem with access to care? How is that so? They can build the building, but if we don't go, everything is not based on the system's fault. There are some deficits in the system. There's some disparities in healthcare. There is not equality in healthcare. That's nationwide. That's not specific to Arkansas. If it was, there would be no such thing as health equity. There would no be such thing as these buzz terms of DEI. If it was across the board the same, there would be no such thing. But where do we hold ourselves accountable for our part in it? Do we get our mammograms every year? Do we go to the doctor and have educated ourselves to say, well, I have a family history. I've been exposed to secondhand smoke. I worked on a job that had asbestos. What can I do? When they say, oh, you're not eligible for screening, do we stop there? We're persistent about everything else. I always say we're the most creative people in the world. We're going to fight for what we're going to fight for. But why it stops with health? Why don't we stop and take no? Or we stop and shut down because we had a bad experience when it comes to our health? We have these functions are taught in faith-based institutions because we think first it starts with trust. And as a culture and as a people, our heritage and our trust usually starts in the church. But then we have some biases there, or then we pick and choose how we want to use that faith. The reverend over here said that this is his journey, this is his walk, is an awesome testimony, and I am so proud to hear that. But a lot of us want to make that proclamation, and faith without works is dead. You can have all the faith in the world, but if you don't use the resources that came from the source, it's dead. So we can't pick and choose how we want to use the scripture. We can't pick and choose What we're going to blame on the systems and blame on the states and blame on this when we haven't done everything that we can to get our health in order and to advocate for ourselves and to help navigate those that are not there yet, the least of these. In 1 Corinthians, it tells us that our body is a temple that was given to us from God. We're going to return it raggedy. We're just going to return it broke down here, thank you. That's what we're doing. Is that right? Think about that. So we know that there's no perfection in any of us. We all have our vices. We all have habits. We all do some things that are not right. There's no exception to anyone or anything or anybody in this room. But we have to pick and choose our habits. Control your habits and don't let your habits control you. If you smoke, we need to stop smoking. I say we. There's no shame in the fact that you smoke. There's no shame in the fact that you have addictions. There's no shame in the fact that you have these vices. The shame is not wanting to do better. The shame is not seeking help, taking precautionary measures, taking extreme steps into saying that I need to make a change in the way that I'm living for longevity, for my wealth, which is my health. We can get to the healthcare system and say, well, they didn't offer me this treatment and so-and-so got it because they look like this. But you haven't looked at so-and-so didn't smoke. So-and-so don't have hypertension or diabetes. So-and-so has hypertension or diabetes, but it's under control because they have a primary care physician. When we take control of our health and we navigate our path forward and we seek prevention and screening, we make our prognosis better for whatever disease we face in our healthcare journey. Be it cancer, be it heart disease, whatever it is, be it hypertension. Because for one, prevention and screening brings back awareness. And when you're aware of what something is, it should make you jog your memory and want to think about it or make changes. When you have these educational things and they say, if you cook this way and you do this and you use salt, it's going to cause this disease. When you're cooking again, it should jog your conscience. Even if you use it, you say, Lord, I ain't got no business using this salt. That means you're aware. So then hopefully that's time you lose less. Hopefully last time you leave a little crunch in your greens and you'll just cook all the nutrients out of them. But it's awareness. And then when we learn it and we get it, we have to make it infectious. And we want it to just spread and start and go along so that we can teach somebody else. And we have to be careful when we get it that we don't condemn people that don't get it. Because that's what we do. When we get it, we've arrived. And thou shalt not that. We become super saints, super health nuts, super this, super that. Calm down. Bring it all the way down. Bring it down. Bring it down. But when we get it, we can't condemn others. We got to show our self-approval, right? We got to walk them through the process. They got to see the good life in us and see how we thriving and we striving, and they got to want some of that. They got to want it. So that's what we want to do. We want to talk about how to advocate for ourselves. We want to talk about prevention and screening. When to get your screenings. How frequently you should go to the physician. Take a friend to the doctor day. How many of us participate in that? Take a loved one, take a friend to the doctor. We got a lot of cliches. We got a lot of little events to go on. It's national this day, national that day, national and everything. But do we participate? Do we do them? We fight for them. We fought for Juneteenth. How many people participate in Juneteenth? Became a national holiday. We fought hard for it. I went to 3 events. It might have been 15 people there. I say, this isn't it. Okay, that's something else, but we ain't gonna talk about that. So, diagnosis and treatment. Let's talk about that a little bit as well. Medicine has advanced so much. And a lot of what we hear about cancer in our communities is how well or how not so well it did relatives that we've treated, that we've cared for as caregivers in the past. Most of the time, it's not the recent past, it's how many of our loved ones suffered when we hear about it. I want to say, first of all, we suffer because, as Dr. Lawrence showed you on our slides, as African Americans, as a community, we get late stage diagnosis. When we detect our diseases in later stages, our treatment options are limited and our prognosis is not as good because we just don't have that many options. The options are getting better, but the later the stage, the less options we will always have. Early diagnosis is our best diagnosis. And how do you get early diagnosis? Is that you have preventive measures. You listen to your bodies. You have relationships and communication and conversation with your providers. There's no better patient to treat than an informed patient that knows what's going on with them. I tell women all the time when I talk about breast cancer, if you don't do your monthly breast exam, nothing really, unless it's just a huge nodule that just stands out and a blind man can see, nothing feels abnormal about your breast to your doctor. He examines you once a year. If you do it every month, you can say that wasn't there last month. That's a little bigger than it was the month before. Or, okay, that's gone. That's not there anymore. It must have been an ingrown hair. It must have been a whatever. But if you do it, you know, and you're aware, then you can bring it to the awareness of someone else. But if we don't see about ourselves, when we go to our physicians, medicine is a science. You're forcing them to guess based on books and practice as to what this might be until we get some tissue from it. But if we can say, I've been having shortness of breath, every time I walk, X amount of feet, I can't this, or, my head's been hurting, or my hair is coming out, or I got this lump over here, my lymph nodes tend to swell. If we don't communicate that, that's like if you don't say, I'm allergic to penicillin, I give you penicillin. You've got to be able to communicate. And the best thing to do, actually, when we go to our doctors, is have our notes. Even if the notes are from a month ago. As it goes down, keep your journal. Keep your journal as what's going on with you, what you're experiencing. Because sometimes we forget. Sometimes we say, I had a headache about 2 weeks ago. And I look back in my journal, I really had a headache every day for 2 weeks. Knows what's your normal and what's your abnormal. Clinical trials. We can't expect optimal outcomes for us as a people if we don't participate. We acknowledge that there's some mistrust in clinical trials. How many people in the room class clinical trials? How many people don't? You don't have to raise your hand. But and more than likely, there's more people that don't than do. But a lot of that mistrust is from miseducation or misunderstanding of the history of clinical trials. Some bad things happen, yes. Acknowledgement, it happened. It happened. That's not a lie. It happened. But was it Tuskegee fault it happened? No. But it happened. But we have to be, just don't want to hear it or know the truth, to feel like everything in life is going to advance, it's going to change, it's going to be modified, and to think that we're still there with clinical trials. Why would we still be there? There's more scientists that look like us, that all they want to do is clinical trials, that all they want to do is research. There's more opportunities out there for African Americans to participate in research because the data for clinical trials shows that less than 6% of African Americans participate in clinical trials. 6%. So 84% of the clinical trials that are done in the U.S. are not participated in by African Americans. So how do we expect the medicine to work for us? if we don't participate. So we want to participate in clinical trials. I'm getting the cue, so I got to wrap this up. I guess when I want to talk about navigation, my key is to be able to self-advocate, be a navigator for yourself, for your families, your loved ones. When you go to the physician, be able to have informed conversations. Be a part of your healthcare journey and make informed decisions about what you want to do. Ask questions. If you don't do anything else when it comes to clinical trial, ask them for the information so you can read it. Ask questions about it. If you decide not to consent, at least you've made an informed decision to know that this is what it is and this is what it's not, and I don't think that is for me. Take our healthcare journey serious. Please get prevention and screening and have relationships with our healthcare providers. Thank you.
Don't go far. Just have a seat. Dr. A, come on up. Dr. Sanders. Mr. Davis, I know you're clean, and as you talked about earlier, you're kind of cool and everything. But you check out this hat on this sister over here. Stand up, man. Look at this hat. This is a good hat. I'm liking this hat, man. I'm competition, man. I got a word that Broadway Joe was in the house. You're Broadway Joe. I'm going to give you the honor of the first question, Broadway Joe. Nice to meet you, sir. I'm going to give you the question. So, what would you had a bunch of people in front of you talking about lung cancer, and you're talking to your audience. What is the one thing you think you want to make sure that they all know, or you think people might want to ask?
Well, thanks to the Arkansas Minority Health Commission and the AMDPA, we have a special segment that I do every Tuesday for the last 15 years on my show called Ask the Doctor. So every month theme, if it's Heart Month, we have a cardiologist on. So the whole point of what we do is we may not be able to answer your questions here, but you need to get you a primary care physician and you need to go to the doctor. So that's what we preach. And that's what I would say from today. We're going to continue to tell people, go to the doctor. Thank you, Marcus, for having me out, too.
Now, there's a brother named Jonathan Laraya who's head of colon and rectal surgeon over at the University of Arkansas. Now, you got to make sure you get him on your show, because being a colon rectal surgeon, people don't want to talk about the poo-poo. But trust me, if you ain't looking at what's coming in that toilet, you're missing something.
Very true.
Thank you very much for being here. And I think, Dr. Sanders, when you think about, what you do is great, because he probably reaches more people in a given day, or definitely in a month, than you, I, or even a program like this does.
Right.
Yeah. That's to be commended. Tell me about Ursula, Ms. Mathis. We heard earlier Dr. May talked about she had her mother had this little tiny nodule on the lung, and nobody bothered to call her, yet somebody tried to have the audacity in the healthcare provider said, well, you should have called us. But what about this thing about getting a second opinion? People sometimes are fearful of telling the doctor, well, I want to ask somebody else, but they think, well, the doctor won't get mad at them and they won't see him anymore. Tell me where we are as far as second opinion. Could you pass it down?
Yes. I encourage everyone to get a second opinion. And I think that most physicians are in agreement and don't have a problem or opposed to you getting a second opinion. And most of them will refer you out for a second opinion. But when you have tests done, you should always want the results. It should never be an option that normal means you don't get a phone call. And if you hear from me, that means that something is wrong. You should always want your test results. And really, in this day and age, you should want a copy of them. so that you keep your own healthcare journey, or you know what's going on, or you're able to monitor your labs and your numbers and everything so that you can see for yourself, this is gradually going up. I got to do better. This was abnormal today and normal yesterday. You don't have to be a medical professional to see that 4 is higher than 1. So you should always, don't wait for them to call you. I always tell people, wear the hair off of your practitioner's head. Call their nurses, call their navigator, call the healthcare system, to the point where they're saying, let me hurry up and get Ursula these, because if she call here one more time. But that's what you just want to be. You want to be on top of it. And then when you're on top of it and you build that relationship, then they know you're going to call, so they're going to try to get it out to you before you call.
All right, please.
Dr. Texan, can I add something?
Absolutely, sir. How can I tell you no?
Well, I want to pick up on one thing that was said, and that is, yeah, you ought to worry your doctor, your physician, to get your results. But I also want to, you notice me kind of fiddling with that computer up there? In today's world, everybody's got an electronic health record. And in that electronic health record, the one that we use and almost every other one has something called MyChart. You need to sign on, and if you don't know how to do it, get your grandchildren to help you. It'll take them 5 minutes. All right? And if you can't figure out what the words say, get them to help you, because I think that is important. I'm going to say one more thing about the second opinion. If a physician doesn't want you to get a second opinion, get the second opinion.
Okay, in your business, you probably run into this more than most of us about the second opinion thing. How do you feel? What do you want to hear from the patient? And how does that communication go?
So the second opinion is, or a third opinion, it's something that, addresses 3 things. One is the technical aspect. There are sometimes physicians who have some limitations in terms of what they can provide. So you would like to get a more expert opinion for the technical aspect of the disease, how to treat it. There is also the aspect of what brings peace of mind to the patient and to the family. That's a very, very important thing, because even getting the same reassurance, that the same opinion, it's very important for patients and families to make sure that they are going into a journey that they did everything they can. Then the third aspect of the second opinion sometimes comes to creating a channel of communication when things become more difficult, when you need something more at that time. You may not need it at the time that you got the second opinion, but you may need it the time that things are progressing, for example, or relapsing. So essentially, you are creating a channel of communication with another expert. The issue, and I agree with Dr. Sanders, is that when physicians become defensive about second opinion or third opinion, sometimes you want them to partner with the patient, but also they want to partner with the other physicians who may get a second or a third opinion. So I think it's one of those things that everybody should feel that the priority is the patient, and the priority is the patient and the family, and whatever happens is around that. So, for example, if a patient asks a second opinion from something that I recommended, I don't take it personal, because my main goal is for them to feel better. And if someone comes up with a better idea, actually, I'm happy, because that challenges me, and that again, it's the main thing. Again, the principle is that it's about the patient and the family. And again, the way I say it may sound a little stereotypic, but I do feel that this is important, and it's a reflection that everybody has to feel and work on it on a daily basis.
You get Broadway Joe down there in Pine Bluff?
Yes, we do.
All right. What are those numbers, Broadway Joe? What's your call sign? What's your numbers? Race.
Power 92.
Power 92. All right.
KIPR.
So I know we're going to be hearing about this when the new mayor comes in. Go ahead, your question, man.
Thank you. So I was really excited about this event today and future events, and wonder what your thoughts are about how health policy can come from this, and what are some of the things that we need to be doing, because we've already heard about, for example, biomarker legislation that actually passed in Arkansas the last session. A member of this church, Representative Fred Allen, and I think we're in his district, that was his bill, and he is a living cancer survivor, walking and breathing as we speak. That legislation was passed, but didn't include Medicaid patients. So that's something that, we can look forward to. I've gotten a note from a physician who's here today interested in the Interstate Medical Compact, and I've looked up online, and that's about licensure. We're one of a few states that haven't done anything. So, what are some of the things from y'all, and you all come with different perspectives in research and in public health and in medicine. And I'm sure there are so many things we could do given our numbers, because if anybody didn't notice today, and I'm gonna stop talking too long, I can't help it. But I'm sure everyone noticed those numbers, and I'd like to take pictures since I'm sitting right here, that even though we're 47, I think, in terms of healthcare access, which anyone would have to attribute to Medicaid expansion in Arkansas that happened. We were the only southern state at the time. We're only 47 with the advent of Medicaid expansion, and that's been happening since the Beebe administration. So even with the numbers and the access through health insurance, the numbers for people across this state, and then the numbers as it relates to the disparities in health for African Americans and other underrepresented minorities in medicine is shocking. So when I saw those numbers as it relates to lung cancer, in particular, cancer in general, I'm clear that there's a lot we can do as it relates to policy. So if you all could give some thoughts on some things that I could write down.
Dr. Sanders?
All right. It may seem a bit disconnected. I mean, I think that Medicaid expansion and equitable Medicaid expansion is vital in every state and in every community. But I'm going to take a step back, and I'm going to say we need to make sure that every school and every neighborhood has sufficient funding. And one of the things I think we need to do is disconnect taxes from funding for school and have baseline funding for all schools. Now, why do I start there? Because people have access to equitable education, then they have opportunities to do other things in life. And so we really don't often connect that to health, but I see it as particularly connected to health. From a political perspective, I think making sure there's sidewalks in neighborhoods, particularly our neighborhoods. Because if there ain't no sidewalk, more people are likely to get hit when they do try to walk, and less people that try to walk. And not everybody learned to walk like we walk on the right side of the road and without knowing how to get hit in South Carolina. All right? I'm from South Carolina as well. So, but those are the things, and those are the things that I call they used to be called the social determinants of health. And what's happened to the social determinants of health now, they were meant to be politically based ideas. What we do now is we measure the social determinants of health for individuals. That's the new thing. What are your social determinants of health? CMS and Joint Commission require that we measure the social.
What is CMS?
The Center for Medicare and Medicaid Services, they handle Medicare and Medicaid. Joint Commission accredits hospitals. They say that now we have to measure the social determinants of health of individuals. And you know what I say that does? That is another one of those dog whistles, because it lets the elected officials off the hook. Because political determinants of health are really about dividing up the resources. That's why I started with schools. That's why I started with funding of education and making it equitable. Neighborhood sidewalks seems minor, but people are more likely to walk and exercise or walk to that store than getting into that car if they got a decent sidewalk. And if you do that walking, get a little aerobic exercise, you sweat a little bit, your heart gets better, your blood pressure goes down, just in the normal things that you do every day. So I think that working together as elected officials and listening to your constituents is the most important thing you can do. And staying in touch with what your constituents need and recognizing that it's all tied together. There is no one thing about health. It's all together. And that's one of the things I wanted to illustrate, is that if you look across those maps and pictures that I showed, the fact that we see that concentrated pattern in the South really has to reflect a series of decisions that have been made in the South. I'd probably say since about 1486, and haven't changed in 400 years. And what we've got to do is figure out how to hear those dog whistles and change them. Does that make sense? Because so many times, I think one of the ones I heard that I can share is one of the Medicaid programs which had work requirements. It was named in a way that it sounded positive. And I think those are the kinds of things we have to work together to really understand, and really understand what's in the interest of the people we care about every day. Right, did that answer your question? You also gave me a platform.
I'm going to ask one final question. I want all the panel members to respond to, unless someone else has a question. Never mind. Reverend McDonald, you go ahead, sir.
Percy. Man, I've heard clinical trials being preached a lot. You got to give me some understanding based upon the past. That's the comfort level you got to help me to overcome, because what we've heard. So y'all have preached that a lot. So hey, give us more better understanding about it.
But before you answer his question, Dr. Sanders, would you please provide? You know what I'm going to ask you. I want the right name for the study that Dr. A commented about, but that study that was done down in Tuskegee. What is the full name so we understand the thrust of this question?
The U.S. Public Health Service study of syphilis.
At Tuskegee. It's not Tuskegee.
It's not the Tuskegee study. It happened there. Before I even go there, I'm going to share a little bit about my past, and that kind of gave me some insight into this. You know, you land in different places through your life for different reasons. But in my time at the Centers for Disease Control, I worked in the Division of Sexually Transmitted Diseases, the same division, if you will, that conceived, moved that study forward, and sustained it, and sustained its package, if you will, for lack of a better word, until about 1984, 85, when the apology came. All right, now let's take a step back. All right, clinical trials. Nobody wants research done on them. But I think something that Dr. A showed that I think is particularly important, that the first phase of the clinical trial is about safety. You know, that hasn't always been the case, but I think we have rules, we have guidelines, we have oversight, such that the first is about safety. The second is about effectiveness. And very rarely now, because we have so many new treatments, do we have placebo trials. Now we have standard of treatment compared to a new treatment. So that is a different thing. So I think the framework of trials is about protection. But I do think as communities, we have to be cognizant and pay attention to enrollment, what the desired outcomes are, who's going to benefit from those outcomes, and just like anything else, ask every question that you can, all right? And today, the FDA, the FDA is looking at everything. And there are agencies that really oversee clinical trials, and they have to be engaged. Each clinical trial have to be in connection with a review board. And we need to participate on those review boards because they require people who are not researchers. They require everyday citizens to participate. So we have to be willing to participate and bring our full selves to the table, and don't be afraid to ask questions.
Dr. A, why don't you comment on that? Because you've run trials.
Yeah, I mean, I think in addition to what Dr. Sanders said, I would like to add two things. One is you can always get out of the trial. So it's a voluntary thing, and you don't sign a contract that you will continue that forever. You have the right to get off the trial even the second that you sign the consent. So that's really important to recognize. The second thing is that the same relationship that you want to have with your doctor will benefit you even if you go on a trial, meaning that you would like to understand about what the trial is. You would like to understand what these tests that are doing are, the blood tests, the scans. So I think if you have a good relationship with your doctor, regardless if you get the standard of care or the trial, you get a level of transparency and honesty that you will need to have regardless, in addition to the oversight and everything else that is much different than it was 10 or 20 years ago. I wanted to emphasize what I mentioned before is that in many ways, a trial is something that a lot of times, not always, builds on what you would have received anyway. So it's always something additional to what you would have had. So you would have had treatment A, you'll get A and B, and at any point you can get off the trial. I think that brings some level of reassurance psychologically that this is something that, yes, it can help other people, but also it can help you. And there are many examples of that. It's not guaranteed that it will help you. That's important to recognize, but it's something that potentially can help you.
And one other thing I want to say about clinical trials, like everything else, just make informed decisions about them. Get all the information and do not sign up for clinical trials for trinkets. Do not be persuaded and pressure into clinical trial for gift cards and for financial gain. More than likely, those are the trials you do not want to participate in. Sign up for the trial because you've got all the information. It's going to be whatever phase of the trial you understand the phases of the trial. You may say that I don't want to participate in a phase 1 trial. I need to know that it's the recommended treatment, that this is what everybody's getting, or either I'm going to get that plus something else. But when you know and you've educated yourself, you can make an informed decision about why you want to do it. Now, if something comes with that, then that was your blessing. That's your overflow. But don't do it because of that. We know that as things grow and everything happens and materializes, there's always an advocate out there that is going to financially gain off of anything good. There's something out there that's going to make it bad. There's a scam out there for everything. Cybersecurity's out there. This is out there. If somebody want to come to your house and draw your blood and sign you up for this trial and say that you're going to be on the moon tomorrow, it's too good to be true. So we've got to use our judgment also when we talk about clinical trials. So it's really just educating yourself and doing what's best for you and your situation and knowing and your reasons of your whys of why you want to participate in the trial.
For the final word on the panel, I'm going to ask you to respond to this. It is my belief that when we look at the mortality rate of African Americans when they have lung cancer, in fact, almost any other cancer, it is not that you're treating the patient's lung cancer, you're treating the patient with every other disease that they have. So you asked an interesting question. What can a politician do about this? Well, I'll tell you. Here in the state of Arkansas, your attorney general, along with 24 other red state attorney generals, is fighting the director of the Environmental Protection Agency for altering the legislation, altering the standard for a thing called PM25. Any of you know what PM25 is? Dr. Sanders alluded to this, but this is particles, particulate matter less than 2.5 microns in size. The problem with this, one of the things that caused increased morbidity with COVID, or one of the things, is that this damages the lungs, impacts also the immune system, and several other cancers, breast, colorectal, and pancreatic cancer. So you have these patients who are showing up with comorbid conditions from environmental things. So when you have an attorney general who's blocking trying to control this standard, I know y'all saw that debate. It was horrible. It was ugly. But look at the alternative. I mean, yeah, Biden looked like crap. But look at the alternative. Vote, 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 vote. Get these people out of office. Support people like that. So, final word. That's right. You first. You can take that one, sir. Final word to the people. And by the way, I know there's some other questions. They're going to be around. So let's ask them. See, the problem is I'm the last thing standing between you all and lunch. And I don't like being in that position. I usually like to have Pastor Hersey be in that position. So we got to do this, one other thing, and then Pastor Hersey is going to be on the hook. Please, go ahead, sir.
Well, my final word is about connecting with your physician, asking questions, being informed, and use all of the available resources that are available, either through your community, through your hospital, through whatever. It's a journey that requires all of the help you can get.
My final comment would be that health is about what we do every day and how we do it together. And do something every day to improve your health. Look at what you got on your plate. The more color, the better. Try to get some exercise every day. If you smoke, quit. And have a relationship with a primary care physician that you can talk to and that's willing to listen to you.
My final comment again is advocacy. It's got to start with self. Meet yourself where you are. Be honest with yourself. Be true to thyself. And you go from there. But then I also want to talk about this vote thing. No one is a silo and no one works on the island. And our presidential candidates or our local officials and everything are the same. So we have to hold the team accountable. And we have to put our vote to where we know the team is in the best interest of us. It's no one person, no one things to make no one decision about nothing. But vote for those that show up because they have a vested interest in your outcomes of your lives and your healths, and not show up to check a box and to get a vote.
Thank you very much to the panel. And like I said, they will be around. Reverend McDonald, can you come here for a moment, please, sir? I'm not the one you got to answer to. It's Miss Shanika Bond.
Good afternoon, everyone. I am standing here to award Reverend Marcus McDonald with a certificate of appreciation. Hill Collaborative, we appreciate you for being a lung cancer advocate and all of the hard work you've done for your community. So we appreciate you, we love you, and thank you.
Thank you. We'll get there. Thank you. Thank you very much. Now, as I said before, I apologize. We're running a little long, but if it's up to me, we'd have lunch. But Pastor Hersey, please come on up.
Hey, can we put our hands together, y'all? Man, thank all of you guys for coming to be a part of this. Man, it's I got my sheet here with all the speakers. Yes, sir. Okay, here. Look, y'all don't know this, but hey, I'm gonna tell Pastor Pointer that we have a team with lung cancer awareness that, hey, we're going to use you guys. We're going to contact you guys whenever we need you. So, man, thank all of you for coming here, for being a part of this. And before I bless the food, I'm going to ask Reverend McDonald's Pastor Ken Martin to come up and bless the food for us, please. Put your hands together for Pastor Ken Martin. All right. This is Reverend McDonald's pastor. Right. So you say, Ken, thank you, Ken.
And I don't want to be before you in the food. So let's pray. Father, we thank you right now for this day, this time. We ask you to bless this food, let it nourish our bodies as well as the hands that have prepared it. In Jesus' name, amen.